Good evening and welcome today to this special event. We have a very eminent speaker, and I would deem it my privilege to introduce her today, Dr. Jayashree Vencatesan. She holds a PhD in biodiversity and biotechnology. She works on issues of conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity and ecological restoration with a special interest in urban wetlands. Dr. Jayashree Venkatesan is the first Indian grantee of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute Center for Tropical Studies, short-term research postdoctoral fellowship, as also the International Human Dimensions Program of the University of Bonn. She was also awarded the prestigious Ramsar Fellowship for Science Writing by the Indian Academy of Science. To add to this, Dr. Venkatesan and Dr. Daniels, as founders of Care Earth Trust, were awarded India's highest prize for environment, that is the Indira Gandhi Paryavaran Work for their efforts, award for their efforts in urban ecology. Having carried out field studies throughout India, she has to her credit 61 scientific publications, 42 technical reports, and 2 books. She currently serves as Care Earth's managing trustee and until recently was a member of the technical committee of the Tamil Nadu State Wetland Authority, Tamil Nadu. And she is also a Wetland Authority, Tamil Nadu State Biodiversity Board, Swift Academy, Government of Tamil Nadu. Dr. Venkatesan is an independent director of the Tamil Nadu Women's Development Corporation, as also an adjunct faculty at the Advanced Institute for Wildlife Studies, Chennai. She spends her time playing with her pet, Messi, Mayur Venkatesan, sketching wildlife and watching old videos of West Indies cricket. That's interesting, man. Welcome. Welcome to the CIC, and I'm sure the audience is going to have a treat listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll begin with a confession which I always make before any good presentation is asked for. While my science is quite rigorous in the sense I've undergone formal training, my presentation skills and language skills are self-taught. So you'll have to bear with that. And I also have a tendency to digress, which my daughter calls lecture mode. She says the surest way to put off donors is to send my mother there, start giving a lecture, and she puts people off and no funding comes through. So with all these as a kind of riders, I will begin this talk. Since I recently was awarded the Ramsar Prize for wise use, 12 women were identified globally for their contribution to wetland conservation. This was following a resolution that was taken at the Conference of Parties. They decided to award me for wise use, so I thought, okay, I'll keep the topic to wise use and talk about why it's the only possible, only feasible strategy and action that we have before us. And I've actually contextualized it within my own research work in Tamil Nadu. My wetland work has largely been in Tamil Nadu, occasionally straying to Kerala, but otherwise, it's the forestry work is pan-India. So the organization that I run, which has the generous support of people like Mr. Lakshminarayanan sir, is called Care Earth Trust. It's an organization that I often describe as people-unfriendly organization. The most friendly person in the organization is I. So you can imagine how the others would be. They begin their conversations by saying, humans are as important as rats or something like that. Or when the tsunami happened, my co-founder, Dr. Daniels, went on to the dais and said, statistically insignificant, the population loss. So they threw us out of MIDS. So this is the setup, but we are all science-based. Interdisciplinary approach is what we use. We don't compromise on the science, and that has been very a good strategy for us, because data rigor is something that's very critical. We maintain that. We work across India, but we are not known at all. In fact, if you come to our neighborhood, it's in Nanganallur, and ask our neighbors what this organization is, they will tell you it's Nai Pidikiranga. In fact, for a long time, I was called the Nai Madam, until my mother-in-law stepped in and said, enough, stop calling her that. Then we do a lot of evidence-based policy work. Because one thing that we learned after being in premier institutions is accountability is something very low in this country, especially among scientists. Why you do what you do? Essentially, it has to benefit somebody somewhere. So you either publish or keep the data open or share. That's something that we all thought we should practice. And so any work that we do either gets into policy or it goes in for on-ground action. Straight away into the topic. I will begin by talking about the Ramsar Convention. It's an intergovernmental treaty, of course, we know, and it's pertaining to the conservation of wetlands. It was adopted in the Iranian city of Ramsar, that's why it's called the Ramsar Convention, in 1971 on February 2nd. That's why we commemorate February 2nd as the World Wetlands Day. It came into force in 1975. Now, one of the things that is not very well known is India was one of the earliest signatories of the Ramsar Convention. In fact, we were within the first 10 or 50. We were very enthusiastic about it, given the leadership that existed then, which was largely pro-environment. 90% of the UN members are contracting parties. You would know who are not the contracting parties, and your guess would be very right. They still continue to be away from all the major conventions. This particular convention, the Ramsar Convention, emphasizes wise use of wetlands. And it says you should designate suitable list of wetlands, identify and designate suitable list of wetlands within your country, which can be prioritized, and you should cooperate. Now, what is left unsaid or what is not readily apparent is the Ramsar Convention and the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is called the CBD, which came into force during the Earth Summit, are the only two conventions that recognize the sovereign right of countries over their resources. So they say you take the action, you draft your action plan and adhere to it. There are no numerical targets, unlike the climate convention or the CITES or anything. So that way these two conventions, I would say, are almost visionary in their approach. Very democratic setup is what they recommend. They say talk about cooperation, they talk about exchange of science, exchange of data. That's why it's really phenomenal that way back in 1971, people had the vision to come up with a more acceptable, more realistic kind of a. It's the oldest of all the conventions dealing with natural resources. This is something that's not very well known. 1971. I mean, that early we had the foresight, but then it was not so much wetlands. It was the importance was given to waterfowl. It all began with bird watching as the backdrop. In fact, I'm told that even the human rights movement, I'm not very sure about this. I read in a paper that even the human rights movement owes its origin to the bird watching, bird protection movement. I don't know how true this one is. And this convention is the only convention that deals with one habitat type. So it's very specific. It's not very generic like the CITES or the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is very broad and all-encompassing. This is limited only to wetlands. Interestingly, India is signatory to all the 13 conventions that are in existence today for protection of natural resources, life form. In fact, CBD, we were the first signatory. The then Minister, Mr. Kamalnath, ran from the aisle to the dais to sign the convention, the treaty. He wanted India to be the first. So that's the kind of leadership we've had, which is very nice. How did India respond to this? We took some time, certainly took some time, and certainly did what we are very good at, coming up with a law. That's something that we excel at, In fact, no tongue-in-cheek remarks, but I think that's one thing that we can become world leaders at, teaching people how to make law. I've had the privilege of that being drafted when some of these laws were being drafted, listening to the senior officials talk. Amazing learning experience. So, but what we did was very smart. That's also something that we are very good at. We tweaked the definition of Ramsar, tweaked the definition of wetlands that the Ramsar uses. This is the definition that Government of India uses. Wetlands are highly variable, dynamic, blah, 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 blah. What is left unsaid? It's like that Ashwatthama Tha Kunjaraha. Dams have been taken out, reservoirs have been taken out from the purview, channels have been taken out from the purview, rivers, streams of lower order have been taken out from the purview. paddy fields are gone. This entire class of wetlands are gone. You will realize why it is after I speak about the original definition. Very smartly, India removed some of the key entities that are considered as wetlands from the purview of the Act. And then there have been subsequent revisions and all that, but still it's a very powerful Act. This is the definition of wetlands by the Ramsar Convention. These are areas of marsh, fen, peatland, or water. So it essentially talks about high altitude to coast, the entire gamut, whether natural or artificial. This is where most people have a problem because they assume wetlands are natural, all other entities are artificial. The convention actually says it doesn't make any difference. If it has water, if it's wet, it's wetland. That's about it. Permanent or temporary. So unless there is standing water, you can't designate it a wetland is an erroneous notion. It can be seasonal. With the water that is static or flowing. So rivers also come under this. Fresh, brackish or salt. Including areas of marine water and the depth of which at low tide does not exceed 6 meters. Very complex definition, if I may say. That is where the biggest problem is. When you have a definition which is so generic and which includes everything, you are free to interpret it the way you want. That's what's happening. I've had these n number of conversations with some of the government officials, field level officials. We would have taken them to some marshy area and I would say in Tamil, sir, ஈரநிலம் தானே சார் இதெல்லாம் wetland. எங்கே மேடம் wetland? Wetlandலாம் இல்லை, மண்ணு தான் இருக்குது பாருங்கள். What they fail to understand is the definition also includes the land around the wetland, land within and around the wetland. So a land that is wet is a wetland, that's all. It's as simple as that. You need not even feel the wetness. If you can just scrape out the topsoil and you see the wetland and the wetness, it's a wetland. Technically, that is what the definition is. But since this was so broad, Government of India thought it's going to be a bigger problem because conventionally in India, paddy fields were categorized as wetlands by the British. So in the revenue parlance, if somebody calls it a wetland, it means a paddy field. I'm certainly not a British system basher, but the kind of havoc they've played on our natural resources is mind-boggling. This dichotomous classification they assured has been the bane of natural resource management in this country. Everything, that cannot be put under one category, they'll push it to the second category. That is how the dichotomous classification works. The convention recognized 42 types of wetlands in existence, falling under three broad categories: marine and coastal, inland wetlands, and human-made wetlands. Tamil Nadu has all of these. All the 42 are represented. One may ask, does it have high altitude wetland? I will talk about it in a minute. It does. We recently discovered the presence of a mountain wetland in Nilgiris, which was last discovered in 1966. Nobody took up any work after that. We somehow managed to do that. All the 42 types are found in Tamil Nadu. This is something even a kid would know. Why are wetlands important? Obviously, for climate change mitigation, the blue carbon efficacy of it is very well known. For nature shock absorbers, especially in the context of disasters that seem to be recurrent, critical for biodiversity. Most productive systems are wetlands. Maximum, it's comparable to a rainforest, in fact. The kind of plants and animals that you would see. They ensure fresh water supply because most people talk about how South Chennai, especially south of Adyar, Besanagar, this entire area used to have this wonderful aquifer and that's why people colonize. But nobody stopped to think, why does it have an aquifer so close to the sea? Simple, it's the presence of a marsh. Sandwiched between the marsh and the sand dune, you will find a groundwater, freshwater aquifer, worldwide, wherever you go in the tropics. Of course, lifeline for the livelihoods, lifeline for agriculture. In fact, our agriculture used to be totally and only dependent on wetlands. It's only now that we have this subsidized power supply and irrational use of water. In fact, somebody called it perverse subsidy, which is what I think it is. And of course, pollution abatement. This is something I think we have mastered. We use wetlands for pollution erosion or mitigation very effectively. Because we believe anything that goes into water gets washed away. So we don't think twice about dumping our sewage or muck into it. Everyone just have to go to the added areas. உங்கள் சாக்கடை எங்கே விடுறீங்க பக்கத்தில் ஏரியில் தான். Then you ask the area, you go to the area, some fellow is pumping the water. என்னங்க இங்கே இந்த வாட்டர் இங்கே கொடுக்குறது இல்லைம்மா, அடையாருக்கு போகுது. ஸோ அடையார் people can drink. Then some people were catching fish, tilapia. I went and asked, I am sometimes very dumb on what's this. என்னம்மா மீன் பிடிக்கிறேன், அப்போ என்ன பண்ண சொல்கிறேன், உன் வேலை பண்ண சொல்கிறேன். சரி இல்லை, என்ன மீன் பிடிக்கிறீங்க, இதில் பாய்சன் இருக்குது, நச்சு இருக்குதுன்னு சொன்னாங்களே, இது கேரளா போகுது, நம்ம ஆளுங்களுக்கு போகல. This is how they rationalize, and amazing. So despite so much of importance and so much of its association with human beings, since 1971, 81% of inland aquatic species and 36% of marine species have declined very dramatically in their numbers, primarily because loss of habitat. Loss of habitat is wetlands are no longer there. The systems that need to support these species are gone, so these species are disappearing at an alarming rate. What about wetlands themselves? This is the most shocking figure that I've ever seen. 71% of wetlands globally have been lost, some of them lost forever. It is here that I have to tell you that, people think it's okay for us. When I say people, I mean people with a vested interest, with kind of hidden agenda. Think it's okay for us to play around with the wetland. We can always recover it. Most vulnerable systems, most fragile systems, they undergo what is called the ecosystem flip. Flipping from one character to another is almost instantaneous in wetlands. And most of the time, the change is irreversible. That is why restoring a wetland is not an easy task. You can restore a deciduous forest. You can restore a scrub jungle. You cannot restore a wetland that easily. All the dredging and bunding and all this fancy shapes, islands and all, this is not restoration. That's a lot of cosmetic earthwork. That's about it. Nothing more than it. Actual restoration doesn't work. In fact, when we set about benchmarks, you're expected to give a benchmark saying this is what we'll do. Most of the time, it doesn't exceed 30. If you're being very honest and truthful, 30% restoration is a great effort. Anything more than that is not possible at all. That's not attractive talk when we're talking to donors, and so we suppress that bit. I'm making a confession. So what are the causes for wetland loss? The usual suspects: reclamation, pollution and all that. But I will now switch over to Chennai to make it more relatable to us. Chennai to me was Madras until I came to live here permanently. And Madras was a city which was looked upon for literacy, research, for academic excellence. Aspiration, a city was Madras. For many, it's Central Station, the bridge and all that. Chennai Super Kings recently. But now Chennai, the reality for me is this. This is a truth that we don't easily wish to acknowledge. It's probably the only city where even the low-income tenements have meters, sometimes running to 100 and 200 meters of pipes, tubes, hanging like this. The scene that you see there is Chitranagar, Koturpuram. People invest a lot in such infrastructure, and these are all examples of outstanding innovation, how they are able to pump water to the third floor using these pipes and all. I mean, it's an amazing feat to see. So also a city where you see the presence of formal and informal in the grey market, typifying water markets. Once again, there are innovations. In places like Kalkuttai, a private residential household uses its bore well to sell water. There the unit of sale is a kodam. It graduates like that. As you go up to Velachery, it becomes a tanker. Around Pallikaranai Marsh, in 2011 we did a study. 500 lorries were plying every day, water tankers. That's the kind of water extraction that goes on. You would notice that I haven't used the picture of the Chennai floods, because that's an overkill once again. So Chennai is a tier 1 city, but it's people call it a regional metropolis. It's essentially an agglomeration of agrarian villages and fishing villages. We know all that. It's located on the east coastal plain. Why do I emphasize that point? Because east coastal plain is a designated vulnerable area globally to climate change. The Bay of Bengal, as you all know, is warmer compared to the Arabian Sea because all our rivers are east flowing. It's a warmer ocean. It's a vulnerable place. That's why you have recurrent storms and cyclones and all that. It's a tropical wet and dry climate with little variation in temperature. In fact, the minimum, the most negligible variation is seen in Ramanathapuram district. It's the only district in the entire country which stays consistently warm. There's not much of a difference. Charismatic, beautiful place, but that's the quality. So issues of droughts and floods are nothing new to or atypical to this city. In fact, the 2015 flood brought a lot of attention, rightfully so. But before that, every 10 years we were having floods. And in 2005, when we did 2007, when we did a study on the 2005 floods, we had predicted that the next floods were going to be in 2015, because that was the pattern that the city was following. And every flood was followed by a drought year. That's also something typical to Chennai. And there's one other aspect to it. Chennai's waterlogging soon became flooding. Post 2015, even if there is 2 centimeters of standing water, people said it was flooding. I've had instances where people said, in the ஆறு இங்க வானா பக்கத்துல கூட்டு போங்க. How do you take a பக்கத்துல கூட்டு போறது? What is alarming though, or what is something that we need to be worried about in foreseeable future, is the fact that submergence and inundation due to sea level rise is a reality. Most of Chennai is going to face this because it's a city that's vertically growing, north to south. So you will have this problem, especially in places around Pulikat, Kovalam, Muthukadu. If any of you have been to this place, you would know why I'm saying this. Complex wetland systems which are untended, left in the open, so highly vulnerable. In fact, I'm told that even NIOT is facing issues of subsidence. Chennai is a city that's carved by water. This is my most recent line. It's a city that's always banked on water to expand and has invariably expanded at the expense of water. I'm saying this based on our work. Wherever the city had to expand, it has been at the cost of wetlands getting reclaimed. There has been no exception to this. Whenever the city had to build a memorial or a facility, infrastructure facility, it has been at the cost of a wetland. So that is how Chennai has grown. We've had dedicated schemes such as ARI schemes, where water bodies, wetlands were converted into housing habitations because they thought the service is no longer required. Fundamentally, driven by common sense, you don't even need science for this. If there is a low-lying area, water is bound to flow into it, however much you try to change its use. It's not going to change. It has no vested interest. It's not like humans that, you do things only for your sake. Water will come where it has to come. That fundamental common sense kind of a thing was forgotten. So Chennai brought its to its doorstep all the troubles, primarily because it expanded by reclaiming wetlands. And it continues to do so. That is far more alarming. Historical blunders, it's okay, we can forgive sometime. It continues to do so. Just do an analysis of the infrastructure that's come up in the last 10 years. See where it goes. All of them will be in and around wetlands. Police stations, IT parks. In fact, the IT parks on OMR are all located on the most vulnerable patches of terrain that you would find. That's what data suggests. The Sipcot estates, for example, they're all in extremely vulnerable area. Rise Chennai, this is the Dutch team that we were a part of. It's a hydrology team. It describes the city as a city built out of water and has as its edifice a mammoth hydraulic grid of wells, pumps, ducts, drains, canals, and pipes, sourcing water directly from under the city or reservoirs located deep within the hinterland. This I thought was an absolute winner of a description of a city, which is something also we don't get to see or even take it seriously. We don't realize that we are sitting on such a big grid until this map was given to me by the Water Resources Department. Every part of the city Every water source of the city, every canal is connected. Nothing exists in isolation. It's against the gradient, sometimes, totally bizarre kind of a design, pumping water right from the south to the north. And the solution for all this is build another reservoir. Where do you build a reservoir? Where there are three wetlands close to each other, you build a reservoir. This is the kind of logic that happens. There are some ducts which even the PWD people are finding it for the first time now. Historical manipulation of the water courses, wetlands of Chennai is unbelievable if you get into details. And all this is available in absolute detail in the Pundi Library of the Water Resources Department. If only we get the time and get to see the memoirs, they call the memoirs. Every bit of it is mapped and it's there. It's mind-boggling. But none of it is something that you would do with a sane mind in these times. It's all against the design of the city, against the structure of the city. So when I talk about my own research, we also do a kind of timelining of how much have we done. Over a 30-year period, these are the areas that we've actually studied in depth. We were either commissioned to do this or we took it upon ourselves to do it. IIT, of course, is a favorite adda. We go there often. OTA, Officers Training Academy. Likewise, many places, Air Force Academy, in all these places we keep studying, and this data is curated, it's available. And it is based on this data that I'm making, all the statements that I'm making. Although here and there I may slip in a personal bias as well. Now to my favorite, most often used series of maps. There was this young student who had undergone a training in open source GIS mapping. And he was generally not having much work to do. So I told him, why don't you look at what's happening to Chennai's wetlands over a time series? So he did that. So two parameters, wetland loss or wetland change, built up area. Built up area includes roads, buildings, everything that's human. Thought, okay, we'll do that. To our surprise, or not so much our surprise, the change was very sedate, very slow until 90s. 90s, there is a remarkable change. You see densification, not only increase, but expansion and densification of built up area. By 2000, it becomes very intense. But wait, 2010, the entire city is clogged. It's become impermeable. 65% of Chennai's wetlands were lost by 2010. We have data for 2020, but we are still analyzing it. There's not much of a reversal. 65% of the city had lost its ability to handle water. It doesn't mean water body disappearing. That's one part of it. The city can no longer handle water. It's just sum and substance of it. So we went into the ward level. I mean, as fine as possible, the resolution. I mean, given an NGO setup, there are limitations. We don't get access to the kind of fine data that others would probably get. But whatever limitations we had, despite that, we did all this. And the sum and substance of it is, city is gone. Then most of the wetlands are gone forever. The only ones that are remaining are the reservoirs. The reservoirs have not changed their character, either their area or boundary. Everything else, there is not even a single wetland in Chennai which has not been tampered with, either for road laying or for power lines or for reclaiming or for housing, for public infrastructure, every wetland, no exception. That made me ask this question. Post the 2015, claims were made about hundreds of wetlands being restored, numbers were thrown around. People pumped in money like mad. We too got a good amount of money. But why do we still get flooded? I mean, any person would ask that question, right? After 2015, if we have corrected the system or made attempts to the system, nothing seems to be working. Why? Possibly this is not what the approach should be. It should be something else. Maybe we should step away. In fact, I've been telling people that maybe all those who are championing wetlands, including Jayashree, should step away and allow others to come in. Because what we are saying is not working. Lack of accountability is the biggest threat to wetland conservation, at least in Chennai. Nobody is accountable. Forget government officials, even NGOs are not accountable. So what is driving the loss? Fundamentally, This definition of wetlands is what is driving the laws. Because one gets bone tired after hours of meeting where we are trying to tell them wetlands also includes your tanks, your eri, kulam, tangal, ella wetland. Illa madam, the water body. So we have assumed that anything made by humans is water body, anything made by God is wetland. And nambala kuduthirukra definition. So this lack of clarity on definition is a loophole for many. For people who want to fund the system, which is what they're doing. Second thing, the typology. We assume that all the areas are the same. It is with that assumption that we handle the restoration. All the tangals are same. Homogeneous treatment. Just look at any of these restoration plans. What do they have? They'll have a bund. On the bund there will be planting. What plants? They will say native species. This is a favorite word. Exotic species are bad, native species is good. So what is exotic, what is native? Nobody knows. The next thing is bund slope, 1:1.5 ratio. Yes, concretize it. Make an amphitheater so that people can read books there, watch movies. Have to do that, go to a theater, no? Why do you want to have a wetland weather? Have a cycling track. Then they will throw in a thing of, for senior people, will have a park. Seriously? Because these are emotional damage. You can't talk back to them, when they say, inga kuழந்தைங்க போய் விளையாடணும் madam. You can't say குழந்தைய கூட்டிட்டு போய் playground விளையாடு. You can't say that. You have to say okay. So this is restoration. What happens to the water body? Have you studied the lake bed? How much are you going to dredge? Where are you going to dredge? Why are you going to dredge? And to compound all of this, there is this standing rule in northern Tamil Nadu that earth carted out of a wetland cannot be carted out of a wetland. If you dredge the earth, it has been deposited in situ. So these grotesque hillocks, islands are coming up. Where they plant, once again, native trees, fruit-bearing trees, so that Panjavarna kili will come. So, if only hillocks are typical or conducive to wetlands, Tamil Nadu with its glorious tradition of water bodies, wetlands, would have them. Every kulam would have it. None of the kulams have any impediment. These are structural impediments, but people don't look at that way. This came about primarily because of this rule which prevents you from taking the earth out. Then the number. How many wetlands are there in Chennai? Can any of us answer this question with confidence? The number will range from 330 to 35,000. That's the kind of class interval we're looking at. Because nobody knows what they're including or what they're excluding. In the absence of a number, you don't have a strategy and action plan. Absence of typology, absence of number. Absence of how they are organized. Absolutely no idea. Now, there is this assumption that water flows west to east in Chennai. Right? That's what people do. Actually, it's quite erroneous. Thanks to the manipulation, water flows from all directions to the sea, towards the sea. These fundamental things are also missing in our ambit. Then, of course, there is massive fight in ownership and administrative jurisdiction. Now, in accordance with the national wetland rules, the state wetland authority has been established and all the wetlands of critical importance are supposed to come under. But until now, there is a bitter fight going on between departments as to who owns these wetlands. Because they're seeing it as a valuable monetary kind of an entity, not as a natural system. For that matter, even in our bird sanctuaries, all our bird sanctuaries are wetland based in Tamil Nadu. The birds are under the control of the forest department. The water body is under the control of the water resources department. And the fish inside the water body is in the control of fisheries department. And then revenue comes in. So they keep fighting. Nobody shows up for the meeting. Invariably, I was the only one who would go for the meeting. I would write minutes saying my honorable members could not be present and sign it myself and come back. Now they've got me out of it, which is good riddance. So these are the things, seemingly very unimportant, seemingly very trivial, but these are the ones that derail the whole thing. Then groundwater abstraction. Here people have innovated considerably. They get into private arrangements, they get into leases, all kinds of arrangements to abstract water. Pollution, there is no stoppage, especially in the arid areas. If you see a wetland that's to its brim full of water, blue, nice water, and thriving fish population, largely tilapia, you can be 100% sure sewage is coming in directly. We are watering all our wetlands using sewage, domestic sewage, and sometimes industrial sewage. All the problematic pollutants, contaminants are present. Hexavalent chromium in good percentage in Pallikaranai Marsh. Where is it coming from? We have no idea because sources are multi-source. There's no point you can identify. The entire system has, this is what IIT has found out, entire city is contaminated with sewage and domestic and industrial. Then of course you have reclamation. This is something that we have mastered. And the process to do it is something that I learned the hard way. First you cut off the inlet. The water body. A wetland normally has an inlet and an outlet. And if it's man-made, it's also got a surplus weir. First they cut off the inlet. So water stops coming in. Then they choke the outlet and the surplus weir. Allow it about 6 months to dry out. The first thing that you will see is garbage being dumped. It will usually be very innocuous, harmless garbage, solid waste. And then the piling starts. It's construction debris, garbage. It's almost like a sandwich, they'll build that. When it reaches 10 meters of piling up, they'll compact it. This is what they're doing. And areas are reclaimed. Many a time we would get these geo-coordinates to look for wetlands. When you actually go there is a temple or a school, some human structure. And temples and all religious entities are also very effectively used for reclamation. They first put a small statue there on puja, and next morning you can be sure it will be encroached. This is not something only the poor and the marginalized do. In fact, they are far less powerful in the scheme of things. It's people with mighty power who are able to do that. And initially, yes, I was quite enthusiastic and I was very convinced that I would change the world. That's now gone. Those days I would go there and stand there and say, the encroachment, and they would say, "Ulla கூப்பிடுறாங்க, உங்களை பேசணும்." I thought this was a genuine conversation till I got to know that this is not the conversation that I wanted to have with them anyway. But luckily for me, in that instance, I didn't even know I was being threatened, so that way I escaped. The next thing that has a lot of impact on what's happening with wetlands is informal water markets. Because these are domestic connections of bore wells which sap out water. There's no control on how much they can extract. And they keep going, digging deeper and deeper and deeper. This you will typically see in all the former farmlands around Red Hills, Porur, Nanmangalam. These are the areas where it's extracted a lot. And these people are very fond of NGOs which do restoration. When I did the Tarambur restoration, something that you should see, any of you, it's a good model for restoration. They came in with a big shawl and that coconut and all that. I thought they were a local community and I was very thrilled. My guys told me, don't get excited, madam. They are the people who extract water. Taye, Deviye, and all that went on. My God, why did I do such a stupid thing? And I gave them a lecture, which of course they didn't listen to, saying you shouldn't abstract water. And then they told me something very interesting. They said, the water we extract is known only to the people who are buying from us and to us who are supplying. The rest of the world thinks it's a mango orchard. So inside a mango orchard, they have a series of bore wells from where they're extracting water and supplying to a very big academic institution. Pasanga padikano illaya, madam. I mean, the kind of lines that are used, it's not out of ignorance. Wetland conversion to other forms and abuse is very beautifully orchestrated. You end up feeling miserable for saying something that's not, in other words, normal times would be something that you are expected to say, that you should conserve nature. No? But they make you feel miserable. This one line shut me up. குழந்தைங்க படிக்கணும் இல்லையா மேடம், உங்களை மாதிரி வரணும் இல்லை, என்னையும் சேர்த்துட்டு. ஸோ எஸ், ஆமாங்க, டு யூ கம் பேக். There are days when you realize you've been taken for such a big ride by somebody who you would otherwise assume to be a very, a person who you can talk down to and with your superior knowledge. It takes you for a ride in no time. And above all, this very archaic land classification system and the absence of a robust land use policy, Tamil Nadu. We're still using what Thomas Munro and others put in place. This is where I have the problem which I first spoke about in 2002 of wastelands. Why call a bit of land wasteland? I mean, seriously. And Purambok is not wasteland. Purambok has a much deeper meaning. Purambok is an area adjacent to your living habitation. The Tamil classification has far more depth to it. It has much more nuanced meaning to it. This wasteland, look at it. Because for ease of administration, you put it under that, and the damn wasteland continues to take. Any development project, when you ask this fundamental question, where is the land for it? We will find wastelands. All ecologically critical areas in Tamil Nadu, unless of course they are with the forest department, are designated as wasteland. Large chunks of mangroves were destroyed, primarily because they were wasteland. Marshes took a toll because they were wasteland. Pallikaranai Marsh was a wasteland. Even though chunks of it is a designated wasteland. And this gyan was given to me by a village administrative officer when I first took up the study in 2001. He was very amused that somebody was studying this Kaduveli. Then he told me, unless you get the land classification changed, there's nothing you can do about it. Every bit of it is allotted. He told me, சும்மா time waste பண்ணிட்டு இருக்காதீங்க மேடம், இதான் நல்லா ஸ்டடி பண்ணுங்க. And he said, it's wasteland. And within wasteland there are subcategories. I believe there are some categories which are easier to convert. I mean, I haven't had the experience of handling that. But I am told that Padai, Puramboko, some classification is there. And Tamil Nadu still hasn't managed to correct this, rectify this. We are still using the same system. Most of your wetland buffers, which are very critical for the wetland to remain stable, are under the category of wasteland. Mechal Puramboko. So pasture lands. There are no cattle, no sheep, and you have pasture land. Allow it to remain fallow, and then have it classified. This is an extract of a place close to Tayur on ECR. Look at the kind of density of wetlands and forests we have. Despite all of what I'm saying, this very gloomy picture that I'm trying to give you, Chennai is probably one of the cities which has a good measure of green and blue areas within the city boundary. There are 18 designated reserve forest areas within the Chennai's boundary, within its administrative boundary. 18, excluding the national park and excluding wetland. And some of them are very charismatic, and some of them are actually restored abandoned mines. The Nanmangalam forest that everybody talks about is an erstwhile mine. And here you find ground orchids. That's the kind of diversity we've been able to bring in. Finally, my pet domain. In fact, my daughter says, this is something you can say with your eyes closed, and even when you're fast asleep. Ma, get up, Pallikaranai Marsh, Pallikaranai Marsh. Then you start up. In fact, I could say this post my surgery when I was trying to recover from my anesthesia. She asked me, how do you restore a wetland? I gave her a lecture about, first you take up a topographic survey. And it's a wetland that's located along the Omar and the Tambaram Velachery road. Interestingly, the local people had the most appropriate name for it. They used to call it the Kaduveli. Even now it's called the Kaduveli bus stand, the bus stand next to it. Kaliva vella eduthittu pora idam, Kaduveli. That was designated as a wasteland. February 2nd, 2001, the Pollution Control Board of Tamil Nadu, headed then by Madam Sheila Rani Chunkar, gave an announcement saying, we are interested in looking at marshes. If there is some volunteer group which is willing to work with us, please apply. And we had Dr. Daniels and I had just started Kerath. Kerath was just one table, one computer, one chair. We were broke. Nobody was willing to engage with us. That continues even today. Then Dr. Daniels had a Western Ghats project and I didn't have anything. So I said, okay, I'll go and ask. So we went and asked Madam for support. Madam said, a 2-member NGO, virtually non-existent. If people are operating out of your living room, I can give you 35,000 with tax deducted 32,000 rupees. We'll give you. Do a study on the biodiversity of the place, because she was very keen on that. And she said, we'll try to do something about it. But she stood with me so much, so firmly, that if at all the credit has to be given to somebody for protecting Pallikaranai Marsh, it's Madam Chunkar. She said, I can't give you money, but the platform for you to present your work will be Tamil Nadu Pollution Control Board. And she took it to the then Honorable Chief Minister, Madam Jayalalitha. All that was done by her. So what did we do with Pallikaranai? The first thing that we found out, because she had told us, don't talk about this encroachment bit, it will go nowhere. It was a very seasoned bureaucrat advising, so we said, okay, madam. This off-cited data, so off-cited that even this guy who, Republic, what's his name? Arnab Goswami. Even he cited this data. So I said that day my days, even Arnab Goswami talking about Pallikaranai being reduced from 6,000 hectare to 600 hectare. You would find these three things very funny. Let me explain and give the context as to why I depicted this. My teacher and colleague Dr. Ranjit Daniels and I were constrained by lack of funds is a very mild way of putting that we were broke, but we still had to find out what the area was. So Ranjit had this TVS XL Champ moped. We used the speedometer of the moped. The two of us used to be on that. Imagine two of us on that moped with me on the pillion, binoculars and a rope. All that we had was these three. We used to go around and round and round the Pallikaranai Marsh on this moped, use the speedometer. Taramani Gate was the northernmost point. Sholinganallur was the southernmost point. Every 500 meters, we'll stop for some tea, which we would carry in a flask. That is how we mapped Pallikaranai Marsh and ascertained that 6,000 hectares was its original expanse. Where we really felt happy and we felt mighty thrilled was when in the subsequent years geospatial analysis were done by NIOT and they said it's 5,974, 30 meters error, less than that. So we were really accurate. We gridded the area and we were very happy. We had two research assistants, one is sitting here now much grown up, 7-year-old, and then Dr. Daniel's daughter, 6-year-old. They were our research assistants essentially to collect samples. That 6-year-old managed to discover a new species, new record for Chennai, for Tamil Nadu. She discovered a reptile. We had these two as a research assistants primarily because we could bribe them with fruity and some chips. But now she's saying it's a violation of labor rights. I said, yeah, fine. But with this 4-member team, we were able to do the fundamental work. Point I'm trying to make is one, the state continues even today, not for us. Any support for wetland research is not easily given, especially if you are caught in this NGO system. If you are in an academic institution, things are better off, is what I heard. But if you are in an NGO, if you are doing ecology, they immediately you are seen as a person who is anti-development. How can there be development without conservation? It's never conservation versus development, it's conservation and development. So when the basics are misunderstood or mishandled, everything goes for a toss. Research is almost looked up with a sense of disdain. Irresponsible people. There are donors who tell us, we don't want research, go do your job. You're being paid to do this. That's not the way you talk to anyone, forget even. And that is the overall thing. It causes irreparable damage. See, certain things you can play around with and have fun. But with natural systems, when they hit back, what happened with Chennai floods is just a result of poor understanding of fundamentals. We still continue to be in a state of denial, still continue to give very little importance to the fundamentals. So what is wise use? Since we are talking about wise use, and essentially it says have national wetland policies, involve a review of the existing legislation and institutional arrangements that deal with it. This is something that has not happened in India. Because it's very apparent that the 3-tier institutional arrangement that's been put in place, where you have a national wetland authority, state wetland authorities, and district wetland committees, they have no teeth whatsoever. The district wetland committee invariably meets and ends by saying, quorum not present. State wetland authority doesn't get convened. What is the point in having these authorities with all the top leadership as chairman and all? First up, I would say, it's bizarre, maybe an extreme thing to say. We should stop having these top leaders as or top position, people holding top position as the chairman. But they won't have time for these things. These are still not priority. You should have somebody who can devote time, attention, and his or head to the task. It never happens. So there is no quorum, no meeting. 2 terms I was in the state wetland authority, we had not even met once. What's the point? District wetland authority, invariably the collector has no time for such things. These are all, he says somebody will look into it, madam. Just give a note and go. Just giving a note and go is the surest way of killing the problem. This is what is happening. But there is not even a talk of a review of the institutional arrangement. When it talks about wetland inventory, monitoring, research, training, education, and public awareness, of which government will do everything and cut out the public awareness to NGOs. This is what happens. That's also something that, one, of course, attention has to be given to all these components, especially monitoring part of it. What is happening to the wetlands which we are restoring? How are we restoring? What are the metrics for restoration? What are the goals? How do you do post-monitoring? All these have to be asked. The hard questions have to be asked and answers made public. Everyone should be accountable. After all, we are playing around with others' lives. Then, of course, public awareness being carted out to NGOs or something. This attitude of, what the government doesn't want to do or cannot do should be given to NGOs needs to stop. And NGOs on their part need to stop playing second fiddle to the government and pretend that we are God's answer to it. In fact, one of the things that personally at Kerath we are all very upset about is the role that NGOs have assumed of being the spokesperson for communities. Our role is not that. Our role is to be a facilitating agency. That's something we need to do. And the most important of all, in fact, it's an emphasis of the title that I use. According to the wetland rules, we need to develop what are called the integrated management plans for every wetland that is prioritized. Every wetland that the district, it's prioritized normally at the district level, that needs to have an IMP, it's integrated management plan. That will detail everything pertaining to the wetland. Every bit of detail. It's a very comprehensive document. But what's happening with that? I've had this experience of drafting it for two places, Pulikat and Pallikaranai Marsh. In Pulikat, until now, until we stepped in, there was this assumption that there are 3 inlets into Pulikat. In reality, there are 5. People sitting at the desk of the lower level, they wanted us to change the number. They said, why? Because the working plan says Moonu, you write Moonu. I said, no, I won't write. Okay, no funding. Grant. The second thing that's happening is the first level of scrutiny happens at the level of a clerk, who essentially looks at whether that data parameter is present or not. That's all. So your IMP stands to get rejected far more than getting accepted. For example, we had said Pallikaranai does not have a buffer because it's built up area. You cannot have a 100-meter buffer. Reject 100-meter buffer இருக்கணும். இல்லைங்க சென்னை 1 பில்டிங் இருக்கு, அது எனக்கு தெரியாது, பஃபர் இல்லை, ரிஜெக்ட். So, in the absence of an IMP, even worse things can happen. An area which is very critical, which is a hub of endemic species of plants, because some person decides it needs to be beautified, will be dredged and beautified. No question, the accountability part can be ensured only if there is an IMP. And we are nowhere close to finalizing even a single IMP for Tamil Nadu. So that is the state we are in. But still, that's the only hope we have. We will continue to pursue. We will continue to ensure that IMPs at least one place is done. So that with that as the kind of a basis, we can push forward. And the Thanditona, we'll be able to do it. It's this kind of hope that keeps us going. Also emphasizes the values of wetlands for sediment and erosion control. Essentially, wise use is something that legally permits human beings to use the wetland, which is very important, especially if you compare it to the way forests are protected. Forest protection is essentially keep people out. That's how all the Forest Act, in fact, Madras Forest Act says don't even come anywhere close to it. In fact, when Pallikaranai was being mooted as a reserve forest area, then PCCF said we will not allow even Jayashree to step in. So I said, sir, that's exactly things that the convention prohibits. So this wise use is something that allows people to participate, to be a part of it. Because there's nothing called inviolate or pristine in India, mainland India, or even for that matter, islands. Every bit of our terrain has been manipulated by humans. And all of human actions need not be seen as being negative. That's a very erroneous way to keep people off, hasn't worked. Bring people in, try to make them more informed, build a constituency of them, build a championship amongst them. That would work. So it also supports a lot of livelihood, so it's very important. And so 89 of our wetlands have been designated. There's been almost a mad rush to designate wetlands as Ramsar sites in India. We're hoping to hit 100 very soon. Our Kerala application for a place close to Trivandrum also is cleared, is what I heard. Tamil Nadu has highest. Sakarai Kotai and Tirthangal. Tirthangal we commenced work recently. And now it's a Ramsar site. So permissions have to be reworked and it's going to be difficult. But it's a very charismatic, beautiful wetland. Most of our Ramsar sites are in Ramanathapuram. The supposedly semi-arid district is the one that's got the best kind of a character when it comes to it. And what I'm personally very happy about, all of us are very happy. 16 of the applications in the first round, 13 were drafted by us. 13 applications were drafted by us, and that was based on a long-term work. We will continue to pursue that work. Now I feel we should also go to other states and try our luck there, probably Andhra Pradesh or someplace. And the bottom line is, wetlands still don't get the kind of attention that they so richly deserve. I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the lovely session, ma'am. I'm Rhodik. I help sustainable startups to scale enablement. So like let's say for sustainable startups to contribute something to wetland conservation or even restoration for that fact, what's a good a very effective entry point to collaborate with Care Earth Trust as such, like are you open to, let's say, startups in water conservation or wetland conservation, like to have pilot projects or like even co-development projects to have like good tech solutions to accelerate your progress or something?
I'm very open to anything that brings about positive change. Willing to collaborate with anyone who wishes to work on this. That's a given as far as Care Earth is concerned. I'm most interested in any effort that will increase the number of organizations or institutions that work on natural resource management and conservation. We have a very little number now, only hardly 5-6 institutions all across Tamil Nadu.
And what's like a very, a very pressing bottleneck that you would face? And let's say, I wish I had a technical solution, or like some company or someone would propose a technical solution to this particular environment problem, let's say data analysis or something like that. What's like a problem statement that you face?
You want to take that? Yeah.
Yes, as an organization.
For me personally, water quality analysis, something, water and soil quality analysis, that's where we get stuck very badly. Very badly we get stuck. If there is a solution to that, if there is some kind of a kit which can easily capture the basic parameters at least, we'll be very happy. pH at least, if not anything. Otherwise it becomes very difficult. And then of course disseminating information. There, whether it be through popular media or through databases, we are stuck badly. We are planning to bring out a booklet very soon, right, with an international organization on 15 charismatic wetlands of Chennai. Then, of course, the thing of disseminating. We recently drafted this cultural significance of Indian wetlands. It was a book that was supposedly to be presented to the Ramsar. The Honorable Prime Minister's office took interest in it and it became PMO's publication. Such things need to be disseminated widely.
Hi, ma'am. Good evening. It was such a wonderful session, very informative. So, the Pallikaranai Marsh, right? It's not just a patch of wetland. It is home to various kind of species, and it's a natural purifier, right? But it is being choked with many waste dumping, trash, and everything. Even though the marshland was declared protected area in the year 2007 by the Tamil Nadu government, illegally trash is still being dumped, and even though there are strict regulations which protect the marshland, people still dump illegal waste, and the water, the remaining of the land is still being polluted with enrichments and trash. So is there any action taken by the government or any NGOs to avoid this?
NGOs have a very limited scope. We can do only up to a point. To answer your question, in 2007, when the area was declared a reserve forest by the then Chief Minister, it was only 312 hectares, and that was south of the Thorepakam Road, the radial road, next to Chennai 1 until Sholinganallur. That was the area that was declared as reserve forest. And the area where the garbage is being dumped is not illegal. It's a corporation patta. They have land rights over it, primarily because this area was a wasteland. It was allotted to them. So, on paper at least, they're not doing anything which is a violation. Individuals dumping along the roadside and all, that's illegal. The same goes for sewage. There is a Chennai Metropolitan, the CMSWB station there, Perungudi station. Originally, 75 acres were given to Chennai Corporation in a place called Sevaram, which is right there. It's all part of the same neighborhood. That to get rid of, to handle garbage without any kind of specification. That land got transferred to CMSSWB, and since this adjacent land happened to be, the wetland happened to be part of their patta, they just expanded into it. An entity of this scale, if it has to be handled, it can be handled only by the government. Private parties can't do much, especially NGOs, they can't do anything. Now the question is, if we shut this, what happens to the historical garbage? What happens to the garbage that comes in every day? Even there, the fundamentals are wrong. We are still working with an estimate of 2,000 to 2,500 metric tons per day, when in 2002 we had estimated 4,800 metric tons. Right? Because it's probably the only place where garbage comes from all around the city into the city. What do we do with that? We need to have those backup plans. Being very realistic, there is no land available for a landfill anymore. You can't have landfills. 50-kilometer radius, you can't even think of even a biomedical facility. With that kind of a thing, much more needs to be done before we can ask for closure. Now they're doing something called biomining. Now some ideas are being mooted for a park, eco park and all that. People have rejected. If you ask me whether this area can be recovered and converted into a marsh, no. It's gone forever. That much I'm very sure. This can at best be in a green area where a lot of trees can be planted. That's about it. It can never become a marsh again. That's gone forever. Thanks. I hope I answered your question.
There was a time when they were discussing placing an incinerator in near the Pallikaranai Marsh. Has that completely been thrown aside?
Yes, sir. Because it's within a straight line distance of 10 kilometers from the Gindi National Park. You're not supposed to have incinerators anywhere less than 10 kilometers from the national park.
You told about drafting IMPs to the betterment of the wetlands. Is it about preservation of wetlands, or in the next stage, like where foreign countries propose wetland schemes where they have constructed wetlands within the site or the neighborhood plan to treat the wastewaters? Did we come to the state where we need to create wetlands education centers like Hong Kong and other things to show people that wetlands can also be used for waste management, wastewater
We
management?
certainly need to do that, and we've included all that. But constructed wetlands are easier said than done. Nobody wants a constructed wetland in their neighborhood. See, one thing that we are all very, what I've learned is, if such ideas are given, constructed wetlands and anything innovative which has been done elsewhere, Singapore, people are very enthusiastic as long as it's not in their neighborhood. The minute you say, unga area la panna. In fact, Chennai has this very dubious distinction of people opposing having green areas in their neighborhood. Around the wetland, if you propose planting. We had that experience in one of the wetlands we did. Tooth and nail there was opposition. Maram vekka kudadu. We had got some beautiful native palms, 20 feet tall palms and all. They said nothing doing. Why? The reason they gave was the most unbelievable one. They said, இங்கே எடுத்துன்னு வந்து வச்சிங்கன்னா வெளியில் இருக்கிற பசங்கள்லாம் இங்கே வருவாங்க, பொண்ணுங்களை கூட்டிட்டு வருவாங்க, எங்கள் பொண்ணுங்க வீட்டில் அஃபெக்ட் ஆவாங்க. This kind of talk that we get to hear when we actually do restoration. So we couldn't do the greening. இன்னி வரைக்கும் we couldn't do the greening. Constructed wetland, they said nothing doing. They used a kind of an existing provision in the wetland rules which says you cannot convert a wetland area into terrestrial. They said by planting you are converting it into terrestrial. Vanda. And another, you see, the best thing is to simulate things to be nature, almost near natural. Constructed wetland is prohibitively expensive. That medium costs a pile and there is no supply of it. Now there is a ban on the transporting the quarried material, so the prices have gone really out of the way. And then people have started using phragmitis and canna. Canna which used to canna theriyumla, red color, orange color flower.
Yes, ma'am.
Canna ஒரு காலத்தில் 10 ரூபாய் வித்துட்டு இருந்தது, இப்போ 75 ரூபாய் ஒரு சாப்ளிங். See, now wetland restoration, afforestation, எல்லாமே they become good channels for making money. That's why the program is getting affected. What we did instead was we went around collecting from the wild, under of course some kind of control. The wild எல்லாம் பிச்சிட்டு வரக்கூடாது. You should leave a stable population there. குறிப்பிட்ட இது எடுத்துட்டு வந்து வச்சோம். But then maintenance costs are heavy. நிறைய issues when actual restoration பண்ணணும்னா ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். சும்மா கண்துடைப்புக்கு பண்ணணும்னா பண்ணிடலாம். It's very easy. வரவே வராது சில wetlands. To answer your question, in education we conduct a regularly, we do walks and curated walks every Margazhi Masam. You know Margazhi, yeah? December 15th to January 15th. Culturally ரொம்ப vibrant Chennai. அதுதான் it coincides with the bird migration season. So ரெண்டும் combine பண்ணி we came up with this grandiose idea of Margazhi bird. So it's doing very well. How many years now? 6th year. Lot of people come. பட் அதை ஆர்கனைஸ் பண்ணி பண்ணுறதுக்கு எவ்வளோ கஷ்டமாக இருக்குன்றது. சேம் குரூப் தான் திருப்பி திருப்பி வராங்க, புது ஆளுங்க வரதில்லை. பெர்மிஷன்ஸ் ப்ராப்ளம், இது ப்ராப்ளம், டிரான்ஸ்போர்ட்டேஷன்.
That's why I asked, is it become a situation of need for edutainment, like things to actually bring awareness to the people?
Probably I am not somebody who is very fond of this edutainment and making it popular. ஓல்ட் ஸ்கூல்னா கொஞ்சம் தப்பாக நினச்சிக்காதீங்க. ஸ்கூலில் போனால் படிச்சுட்டு வரணும், சும்மா அதெல்லாம் இது பண்ணக்கூடாதுன்னு அந்த டைப்னா. ஸோ அப்படி சே வந்தாங்கன்னா வாக்குக்கு வாய மூடிட்டு கற்றுட்டு போகணும். சும்மா அங்கே வந்து இது பண்ணுறது வந்து செல்ஃபி எடுக்கிறதெல்லாம் ஐ வில் நாட் அலோவ். மேபி தட்ஸ் வை பீப்புள் ஆர் நாட் கம்மிங். அதுவும் இருக்கலாம். இந்த பாட்டி வந்து ரொம்ப லுள்ளு பண்ணுதுன்னு அதேமாரி இல்லை. சி ஆன் அ சீரியஸ் நோ, நீங்கள் வரத்தினுடைய குறிக்கோள் என்ன? there is a particular group of children who come from MCC school. சின்ன பசங்க 6th standard 5th standard. The kind of knowledge and இது அவேர்னஸ் என்ன மாட்டேன், the kind of in-depth knowledge they have பிரமிக்க வைக்கிறது. அதே மாதிரி ஊனவாஞ்சேரி, there is a place off வண்டலூர், அங்கே ஒரு பொண்ணு she is given talk about wetland. எவ்வளோ பியூட்டிஃபுல்லாக கொடுக்குறாங்க. அந்த சீரியஸ்னஸோடு பண்ணால் ஃபன் கூட, ஃபன் இருக்க தான் செய்யணும், பண்ணலாம். பட் சும்மா வந்து இது பண்ணுறது ஐ வில் நாட் சர்டன். சம்டைம்ஸ் அன்ரீசனபிள் ஆகிடுறதுங்க. எனி பர்சன் வித் சீரியஸ் இன்டென்ஷன் மோஸ்ட் வெல்கம், வில் பி ஹாப்பி டு டேக் தம் அரவுண்ட். அண்ட் ஐம் ஆல்சோ ஐ எம் அ பிலீவர் தட் இட் ஷுட் நாட் பிகம் கைண்ட் ஆஃப் சார்ஜபிள். இதெல்லாம் பண்ணக்கூடாது. வெரி இட் ஷுட் பி சம்திங் தட்ஸ் டன் வித் an intention to do good. The old school விட்டுருங்க.
Okay.
Yes ma'am. Ma'am, you are going to ask me a question. Oh, okay.
Thank you so much, Jayashree. It was really nice.
Thank
I want to ask you, are you planning any kind of training programs for, you're saying the first level is the clerk and the junior government officials, they are the ones who are stalling a lot of things and because of their ignorance. Are you thinking of having any kind of training courses to, get them to be more, knowledge about biodiversity, that they don't, the word biodiversity itself is
Complex.
unknown, yeah, to a lot of people.
Ma'am, we have given a proposal to the Rockefeller Foundation, but now we have stopped funding, where we are planning to talk to people who matter, I mean lower hierarchy, on using plants as indicators of wetland health. That's one thing that people seem to relate to very well. Which plant to see and which animal to look for. What does the presence of a catfish signify? Which catfish species signifies this? That's something that they're able to relate to very well. We've given a proposal, ma'am. 10 years ago, we did one for a training for forest department officials, because at that point of time, there was not much of expertise on wetlands with forest. That went well. Apart from that, I haven't, maybe I'll take this as an output and I'll work on it, ma'am. I'll do that. Certainly do that.
Ma'am,
Sir.
Thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you, sir.
See, I think there's one elephant in the room, right? Like the population was 30 crores at the time of independence. It's almost 5 times that amount now, probably 142 or 150 crores. Tinagar was a wetland. The place where we are sitting right now was a wetland.
Sure.
So it's essentially we are just pushing, we're just trying to push the problem into another zone, right? Like just trying to say, okay, it's not my problem. City is now 50 kilometers south. So we need to come up with some, we need to address the real issue in the room. That's one thing. That's one question. I mean, how do we address the real question, right? The second thing is, can you give like top three recommendations that to go forward on wetlands for Tamil Nadu, because you worked extensively on this.
Okay, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The first one, yeah, population is certainly an issue that will impact very highly. And I wanted to say that this was also a classic example of a floodplain being reclaimed to build an infrastructure. My daughter said, don't open your mouth on it. But I'm thankful that you said it. Sir, going forward, I think only two types of land systems will exist. One, protected forests. Two, metropolitan cities or urban areas. I'm very, very clear about that. There's not going to be any of these peri-urban, all that is going to be taken into cities. So as possibly a desperate attempt, we are trying to focus on urban ecology. One of the things I will tell you, because lack of green space, blue space, we call that blue green infrastructure. We are coming up with means to test if even small patches of blue and green could be integrated with grey. We tested it out in Sholinganallur, that's Elcott Estate, where we call that Project Green Iota. Essentially create a corridor of plants known to support the locally occurring birds and other species, especially butterflies and all. It worked. But after that, we were not able to scale up. One is to conserve large patches, like probably what China does or these countries do. We don't have that kind of a thing. A good model for us to follow in nearby future would be the kind of model that Europe follows in Paris and other places, where you have small pockets of land, dedicated green space of different kinds. It's not a homogeneous thing. Depending on what kind of people live there, what kind of use, what kind of animals could come there. You design it in such a way that you connect up the place to simulate larger patches. This is small patch conservation. That is probably the only way we can, to a certain extent, address the issue. But if you ask me whether it will be a kind of a pakka 100% answer to the problem we have, no. Somewhere along the middle we will head. As regards three recommendations for wetlands, first we'll have to identify all the charismatic wetlands of Tamil Nadu, not limited only to your Eri Kulam, however fond we are of it. Focus should be given to mountain wetlands, especially in the Nilgiris and Western Ghats, essentially Western Ghats. Second would be build capacities amongst large number of people in wetland conservation. As of now, we have a very limited number. That number is not going to suffice. You need large group, only then there will be review, only then there will be a kind of self-correction. Now, these days, whatever Jayashree says is correct, whatever X says is correct. That's not the way things are done. And the third most critical thing is land use needs to be redefined. Unless that is done, we lose most of our, already we've lost most of our wetlands. Very soon, we will lose the rest. This would be my recommendation. Thank you. Sir. Thank you, sir.
Wetlands. And also, I understand CMDA is also preparing the master plans.
Yes,
So, whether these two are interconnected, these two efforts are interconnected, or
no, sir, no. We've taken the report. I mean, my integrated management plan was not accepted by the clerk. So he felt it was quality needs to improve. He hasn't passed it on to the DFO. So I'm stuck there. But independently, we've done a series of studies where we looked at green printing. What does the city's scenario look like 10 years from now, 20 years from now? From a business as usual scenario to interventions to protect wetlands. Those findings we've given.
But CMDS plan will eventually govern the land use.
Yeah, so we'll have to
And
give
if
it
it
to
is
CMDS.
not integrated into that, so there could be a
It's a very
potential conflict.
yeah, it's a very silo-like function, sir. So
Okay.
we play the role of facilitators. Irrespective of any department asking, we are the ones who are carrying these reports around, making presentations and trying to convince people.
Okay.
On record, there is absolutely no need to take this to that. That kind of a provision doesn't exist.
Okay.
They're all standalone.
So state has any wetland management strategy or policy in place as of now?
Policy is government dictated, central government. Strategy, they yet to draft it.
Okay, but that national water policy says that rivers are like living entities. So
Yeah.
can we have similar kind of arrangement for wetlands as well, at least for the charismatic wetlands,
Yeah.
that they can be declared as living entities, at least that legal
That's what the
safeguards.
Ramsar also says. So the
Yes.
first hope is these 18 which have been declared are living entities. What is not known very well is all these are actually protected areas. These are all bird sanctuaries.
Right.
So as the first step, they essentially declared all the protected areas as Ramsar sites because it's easier to do that. The
Yeah.
others, it's not going to be easy, sir.
Okay.
It's not going to
And
be
the
easy.
People's Biodiversity Register also, which is also a mandate for the local bodies, and this should also be interconnected.
Anjana, why don't you talk about, she did an evaluation of People's Biodiversity Register in the
So
Nilgiris.
I'm not sure whether GCC has any People's Biodiversity Register in place, which is at the local level it's a mandate, and that should be having a direct like connection with the wetland management.
Sir, then NGT and the Supreme Court pulled up all the governments for failure to do the PBRs and they
Yeah.
gave a dictum saying you'll have to wrap it up by a particular date.
Right.
Tamil Nadu found an effective way to do that, which I cannot disclose in particular public. All the 29,000 PBRs were readied in a month's time. So that's about it. You would want to say something about what you found in Nilgiris?
So we were given a study to compile the PBRs of 6 panchayats in Nilgiris, in Kunnur specifically. And that was back in 2021. And what we found was that the Biodiversity Management Committee, which is also mandated, that itself is non-existent. So they were able to get signatories, but it wasn't functional. Also, the BMC's responsibility has now been shifted away from the Forest Department to the Block Development Officer. And right around that time, it was also peak COVID crisis. So none of the local panchayat or the BDOs have the time to, or the resources for that matter, or the technical know-how to sit and prepare these people's biodiversity registers in consultation. Another thing that we found while preparing it with the people is that the format is very bulky, it's very prohibitively laborious to get through. So no one wants to sit and get through 15 sheets of flora and fauna as an exercise. So these were... I'm saying even one time is not happening. Yes. So, yes.
வணக்கம்மா, என் பேர் வெங்கட், வேளச்சேரியிலேருந்து வரேன். நீங்கள் ரொம்ப காலமாக பள்ளிக்கரணை மார்ஷ்லேண்டில் ஒர்க் பண்ணியிருக்கலாம். இந்த கேள்வி, வேளச்சேரி இப்போ ஆஃப் லேட் இஸ் குவைட் ஃபேமஸ் ஃபார் ஃப்ளட்டிங். அந்த காலத்தில் நீங்கள் சொன்ன 2000க்கும் 2020 2020 இப்போ நடக்கிறதுக்கும் உங்களுக்கு ஏதாவது ஒரு சொல்யூஷன் இருக்கா? இப்போ ஆஃப்டர் த ஃப்ளட் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா இந்த கல்வெட்டு பெருசுப்படுத்தணும், ரோட் சைடில் நிறைய பிரிட்ஜஸ்லாம் வந்ததுக்கப்புறம் 10 அடியை 20 அடி ஆக்குனாங்க, திருப்பி பள்ளமாக்குறாங்க. அதுக்கப்புறம் திடீர்னு நாங்கள் எக்கோ பார்க் நீங்கள் சொன்ன மாதிரி ஏற்கனவே எண்ணெய் ஓட்டி அந்த விண்மில் இந்த இதெல்லாமே நிறையா ஆக்குபைட் ஆச்சு. எக்கோ பார்க்ஸ்லாம் பண்ணுறேன், பிரிட்ஜு கட்ட போகிறேன், ஃபோட்டோகிராஃபிக்கு அது இன்னும் பார்க் பண்ண போகிறேன் அப்படின்னு வி ஆல் அப்ஜெக்டட் இட் லைக் இதர் இட் இஸ் நாட் கம் அவுட். பட் ஆனால் திரும்ப அதில் ஏதாவது ஒன்று பண்ணணுன்ற மாதிரி பண்ணுறாங்க. இப்போ போன தடவை ஃப்ளட்டில் பார்த்தீங்கன்னா 5 நாள் கிட்ட வேளச்சேரி மிதக்குதுன்னாங்க. கேட்டால் கடல் மேலே லெவலில் இருக்குது, அங்கேருந்து தான் உள்ளே வருதுன்றாங்க. ஆனால் அதனுடைய வழித்தடம்னு பார்த்தோன்னா மார்ஷ்லேண்டு தான், தண்ணி இங்கேருந்து போகிறதுக்கு. அதுக்கு ஏதாவது சொல்யூஷன்ஸ் எதாவது இருக்கா? இல்லை கரெக்டாக கவர்மெண்ட் இப்போ பண்ணுறாங்களா? இல்லை வேளச்சேரினா ஃப்ளட்டாக தான் இருக்குமா இன்னும் போக? அதை பற்றி தான் சொல்ல முடியுமா?
வேளச்சேரி 1966லேருந்து பரிச்சயம். ஏன்னா ஒன் ஆஃப் த ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ரெசிடென்ஸ் ஆஃப் ஜெகநாதபுரம் வாஸ் மை கிராண்ட் ஃபாதர். அங்கே தான் நான் வெட்லண்ட், வேளச்சேரி ஏரியில் தான் நான் வெட்லண்டை பற்றி படிக்க ஆரம்பித்தேன். அந்த காலத்துலேயும் தண்ணி வரும். எங்கே வரைக்கும் தண்ணி வரும்னா ஃப்ளட்டிங்கு பஸ் ஸ்டாண்ட் இருக்குது பாருங்கள், லிங்கம் ஸ்டோர், அங்கே தான் தண்ணி வரும். தண்டீஸ்வரம் காலனிலாம் எப்போவுமே தண்ணியில் தான் இருக்கும், வெள்ளத்தில் தான் இருக்கும். நொங்கு விற்பாங்க, படகு எடுத்துகிட்டு போவாங்க ஆட்கள். ஃபுல்லாக அங்கேருந்து ஆரம்பிக்கும் சதுப்பு நிலம். பாம்பு இருக்கும், இது இருக்கும், எல்லாம் இருக்கும், தவளை இருக்கும், பியூட்டிஃபுல்லாக இருக்கும் அந்த இடம். முதல் இது அது. ரெண்டாவது, கடல் மட்டத்துக்கு சில இடங்கள் கம்மி தாழ்வாக இருக்குது, சில இடங்கள்னா அது உண்மை தான். அதனால தண்ணி வரணுன்றது உண்மை இல்லை. கடல் மட்டத்துக்கு கீழே இருக்குது சில இடங்கள். மூணாவது, வேளச்சேரியை பொறுத்தின வரைக்கும் நிறைய சேஞ்சஸ் இர்ரிவர்சபிள். நான் முன்னே சொன்ன மாதிரி வேளச்சேரி ஏரி அவ்வளோ பெரிய ஏரி இப்போ 1/3 கூட இல்லை, எக்ஸ்டென்ட் போயிடுச்சு. உங்கள் ஃபீனிக்ஸ் மாலு எல்லாமே ஏரி இடம் தான். நாங்கள் அந்த கார் ட்ராக் ரோடு இருக்குது பாருங்கள், 5 furlong ரோடு கேட்டுறாங்க. அங்கேருந்து நடந்து ஏரி கரையில் போவோம் ஜெகநாதபுரத்துக்கு. அங்கே 1968 69 ஒரு டென்ட்டு கொட்டா தவிர வேறு ஒன்றும் இருக்காது. அங்கே மிகப்பெரிய ஒரு இது என்னென்னா, தண்டீஸ்வரன் கோவிலுக்கு எதிர ஒரு அந்த டேர்னிங்கில் ஒரு அம்மன் கோவில் இருக்குது. இப்போ இருக்கான்னு தெரியல, ஏரி கரையில் இருக்கும். அந்த அம்மன் கோவில் கிணறுல தண்ணி மேலே வந்ததுன்னா வெள்ளம் வரும்னு அங்கே ஒரு ஐதீகம் இருக்கும். அதுலேருந்து எல்லாத்தையும் நாசம் பண்ணியாச்சு. ஒரு பியூட்டிஃபுல் சிஸ்டம் இருந்தது, அது கம்ப்ளீட்டாக போயிடுது. இப்போ எதனா பண்ண முடியுமான்னு கேட்டால், சாரி டு சே, நிறைய இடங்கள் தண்ணியில் மிதக்க தான் செய்யும். ஏன்னா அந்த இடத்துல மாத்திரம் எதனா பண்ணால் அந்த பிரச்சனை தீராதுங்க. பரங்கி மலையிலேருந்து ஆரம்பித்து கடல் வரைக்கும் பண்ணால் தான் தீரும். அந்த அப்ரோச் நம்மளுக்கு கிடையாது. இந்த கெனாலை தோண்டி தோண்டி விடுறதுல பிரச்சனையை ஷிஃப்ட் பண்ணுறோம், அவ்வளோ. மயிலை பாலாஜி நகரில் வெள்ளம் வராதுக்கு தண்டீஸ்வரன் நகரில் வரும், டான்சி நகரில் வராது, பேபி நகரில் வரும். இப்படி தான் வந்துட்டு இருக்குமே தவிர தண்ணி உள்ளே தான் சுயண்டுன்னு இருக்கும். இது படிக்கணுன்னா என்டையர் அந்த பேசின் எடுத்து படிக்கணும். ஒரு இடம் எடுத்து பண்ணிச்சா நடக்காது. அதுதான் பண்ண மாட்டேன்றாங்க. பள்ளிக்கரணை மார்ஷ் தான் உங்களுக்கு அந்த தண்ணி வடிகிற இடம். ஒரு பேசின் மாதிரி இங்கே பள்ளிக்கரணை மார்ஷ்ன்றது 234 சதுரடி ஸ்கொயர் கிலோமீட்டர் ஏரியாவுக்கு ஒரு பேசின். வாஷ் பேசின் இருக்கும் இல்லைங்களா, வீட்டில் இருக்கிற எல்லா தண்ணியும் வாஷ் பேசினில் வந்து போகும்ல, அந்த வாஷ் பேசின் தான் பள்ளிக்கரணை மார்ஷ். நேச்சுரலி கடலுக்கு போகும். நம்ம யோசிக்கிற மாதிரி அப்படியே ரேப்பிடாக போகாது. ஆதி காலத்தில் அவங்க எப்படி பண்ணியிருந்தாங்கன்னா தாங்கி தாங்கி நிதானமாக போகும் எப்போவுமே. அப்போ தான் நிலத்தடி நீர் என்னென்னா இருக்கும். ஃப்ளஷ் பண்ணி விட்டால் போயிடும் எல்லாம். இது ட்ரெயின் பண்ணும். ட்ரெயின் பண்ணி நிதானமாக போய் கடலில் போய் சேரும். இந்த ஃப்ரெஷ் வாட்டர் நிதானமாக போகிறதுனால தான் உப்பு தண்ணி உள்ளே வராது, தடையாக நிற்கும் பூமி அடியில் இருக்கிறது. இப்போ பார்த்திங்கன்னா உப்பு தண்ணி உள்ளே வந்தாச்சு, எல்லா இடமும் வந்துடுச்சு உப்பு தண்ணி. பெருங்குடியில் உப்பு தண்ணி தான் இப்போ. அந்த மாதிரி அந்த இது சிஸ்டம் போயிடுச்சு இப்போது. இந்த ஸ்ட்ரெயிட் கட் கெனால்ஸ் போனாலே ஃப்ளஷ் தான் ஆகும், வாட்டர் ட்ரெயின் ஆகும். தேங்க்யூ. ஐம் சாரி, நான் பாசிட்டிவாக ஆன்சர் கொடுக்க முடியல என்னால். மார்ஷ்லேண்ட் அந்த குப்பை இடத்த எடுக்கணும் சார், கார்பேஜ் டம்ப் எடுக்கணும். இருக்குது சார், மேனேஜ்மெண்ட் பிளானே இருக்குது கவர்மெண்ட்.
Thank you very much. That was a fascinating, riveting lecture that you have given. I just have a question for the young audience here. What is the definition of ecology? Anyone? Yeah, please. I got a very simple definition long back. It says it's a science of eco. You dump waste into this thing, and that nature answers you back as an eco. And that is ecology. Right? This conversation has to start not amongst ourselves alone, but it has to go to the people. Let me tell you an incident. Every year, there are certain parts of the city which gets flooded. So when as a young officer, we used to go around and shout at people, why aren't you doing this, why aren't you doing that? An MLA called me and said, தம்பி உட்காருங்க, இந்த வருஷம் இப்படி தான் வரும். நீங்கள் இப்போ வந்துட்டு இங்கே கத்தினாப்பில் ஒன்றும் நடந்துடாது. மோட்டரை படன்னு ஓட்டி விடுங்க, அங்கங்கே சாப்பாடு பொட்டலம் கொடுங்க, அவ்வளோதான். 4 நாள் எங்கள் வீட்டை காலி பண்ணிவிட்டு இங்கே இருப்போம், சாப்பிட்டுட்டு அதுக்கப்புறம் போயிடுவோம். தண்ணி தனியாக தானே தான் வடியணுமே தவிர உங்கள் மோட்டர்னால் ஒன்றும் வடிகிறதில்ல. You have to understand the topography also. All the canals are flowing above and you are trying to pump against the gradient, where will it go? Like Madam said, it has to drain. And that will take its time. We have gone and sat into those areas, and now we have not allowed the water to drain. Now, these conversations have to occur with the people who stay there. That is when the whole, when the people start involving themselves instead of, parking their cars on the flyovers because water is coming in their land. All the BMWs and the Mercedes Benz were parked on the flyovers in Velachery. So we find short-term solutions. We try to, get over this crisis till the next crisis comes. So these conversations have to go on. We have to take Madam's expertise, listen to them, but go and converse with your larger population. And unless it becomes a people's movement, I don't think we have solutions. So thank you very much, Madam, for initiating that dialogue. I hope this dialogue continues. You have lighted the first candle. Maybe each one of us in the room will try to light more candles and spread awareness and see that this becomes a people's movement. Thank you very much. And we hope to see more conversations like this at this platform of the Chennai International Center. So congratulations on your award, and may your work and the tribe that you represent may it flourish. Thank you very much. 26th is our next meeting. We have a very popular subject. Madam, I think, gave us an advertisement, the CSK. We are talking of the second book on the Chennai Super Kings, and that is 26th at this very auditorium. We hope to see all of you then. And after that would be, Shabri?
So, May 3rd, Tamili's book.
Yeah, on the May 3rd, we have another book discussion on South India, is it? On Tamils. On Tamils. So that would also be an extremely interesting topic. We hope to see all of you. Please do come and encourage our organization and our sessions. Thank you.